Genji once again tightened his bow tie and looked outside through the crack in the curtains. Maybe the rain had died down a bit since the previous night, but it didn't look like the thick rain clouds were planning to let any trace of the morning sun get by. The morning was dim and far from refreshing.
As expected, it doesn't seem that it will stop today.
My apologies for keeping you waiting, Genji-sama. Kanon finished checking his appearance and exited the washroom. In a normal schedule, it was rare for anyone to have to suffer going straight from a midnight shift to a morning shift. It was a special system for just the 2 days of the family conference. But then, as long as the typhoon didn't leave today, the relatives' stay on this island would last until tomorrow. Kanon thought it was best to be prepared for the special schedule to be extended one more day. The two of them left the guest house, opening their umbrellas. The rose garden had been devastated by the wind and rain last night. Even though they had spent several days making it beautiful to welcome the guests, it had only taken one stormy night to ruin it. Kanon sighed. The two headed for the mansion. They were supposed to meet up with Goda and prepare breakfast. Goda was such a perfectionist that he would have undoubtedly been up for some time already, and now be in the middle of preparing a breakfast both exquisite and as elegant as glasswork. They reached the overhang by the entrance to the mansion and folded up their umbrellas. Genji took from his pocket a bundle of several keys and used it to unlock the front door. There was nothing on Rokkanjima outside the Ushirimiya family mansion, so there never used to be a custom of locking up. However, Natsuhe had ordered that it would be part of their duties to lock up the mansion from around midnight to early morning. And unlocking the early morning was to be done by servants who had the morning shift. Since Goda would begin the preparations for breakfast as soon as he woke up, this task was to be undertaken by Genji and Kanon. Silence had fallen in the mansion, giving the impression that the mansion itself was still asleep.
Well then, let us begin the morning chores.
Yes. The two of them split up and began opening the curtains throughout the mansion. If the curtains remained closed, the inside of the mansion would be unable to shake off its gloom, as if it hadn't yet managed to escape the previous night. Kanon, following a well-versed procedure, went around the mansion opening one window after another without having to retrace his steps once. Even with this horrible weather, by opening the curtains, it began to feel just a little bit like morning. While doing that, he passed in front of the kitchen. Even though he hadn't yet smelled anything, his empty stomach started aching in anticipation of the scent of Goda's much bragged about cooking.
Good morning.
Huh? He tried to greet Goda, who he had thought would be preparing the meal inside the kitchen, but Goda was nowhere to be seen.
He's fucking dead.
The kitchen was darkly lit, and never mind the curtains, the ventilation fan wasn't even spinning. It was still cold in the room, without a hint of flame, and of course, no preparations of breakfast were taking place. Although, it must not be allowed to happen. Maybe Goda had overslept. Servants are humans too. They can sometimes fail to wake up or something and be late as a result. In the rare case of that happening, it was the virtue of a servant to casually smooth the situation over so as to not cause an unsightly scene, and to make sure that their masters never even noticed that such a mistake happened in the first place. Kanon took up the receiver of the phone fitted to the wall and dialed the extension number for the room where the servant slept. Huh? He couldn't hear the characteristic sound of a dial tone. Kanon tried picking up the receiver again, but even so, he couldn't hear the usual dial tone. He tried dialing again, but it had no apparent effect.
This is why you pay your phone bills, kids.
Could it be that the lightning last night had caused a mechanical fault and broken the internal telephone lines? The equipment in this mansion was all worn out. Kanon finally fully understood that even the smallest thing could have caused it to break down. Kanon gave up trying to wake him through the phone, and dashed off to the room where the servants slept.
Is it bad every time I hear breakdown, I immediately think of JoJo?
How long had she slept until? How long had it been since she had woken and started lazily staring up at the ceiling? The vague sense of awakening was Natsuhi's usual morning routine. Her sleep was always light, and she wouldn't even have been able to sleep at all without medicine.
Oh no, she's an opioid.
To Natsuhi, sleeping was definitely not a happy thing. When she looked outside, she saw that it was still pouring. If she hadn't sensed a tiny amount of light, she might have mistakenly thought that it was still last night. She herself was one of the hosts, so she mustn't wake up later than her guests. Urging herself on, she raised up her body, which still hadn't completely recovered from yesterday's unweariness. While she was inside this room, no one would torment her. Her headache wouldn't get any worse than it already was. This room was her only peaceful space. So when she left, it meant returning to the world of her husband's siblings probing each other's minds. Then, wouldn't it be better to just stay locked up in this room forever? Natsuhi smiled bitterly at this fantasy. She was starting to sound like Kinzo. Even though most of the time she would call Kinzo names for staying locked up in his own room and taking notice of anyone. The truth was that she actually longed to do so herself. Natsuhi gave her head a small shake, and her fantasy was replaced by the reawakening of her usual headache. When she reached for the doorknob, trying to leave the room, her hand touched the scorpion charm that she had hung from it before going to sleep the previous night. It was Maria's charm that Jessica had given Natsuhi. If she remembered correctly, Jessica had said something about it having the power to repel magic, and that she should hang it from her doorknob. Maybe it was thanks to the charm that, at least this room had been protected from her husband's siblings' malice. As she thought this, her mood began to get a little more cheerful. So perhaps it was thanks to Jessica that I was able to get a little peaceful sleep. Then Natsuhi remembered. That's right. Last night I promised Jessica that I would give her a charm of my own in exchange for this one, didn't I? Natsuhi opened a drawer of her dresser and took out an antique accessory case that she had treasured ever since she was a child. Inside, there were many small objects that Natsuhi had thought were valuable at the time. From amidst those, she pulled out a red pouch. Inside was a small, round mirror about 10 centimeters across. It looked quite old, but the design on the back of the mirror was very ornate, and it felt like something with historical value. At the very least, it looked much more effective than compared to the other charm, which looked like a plastic scorpion key holder. She had heard that this mirror was a spiritual mirror to ward off evil spirits, and she had been given it specially by her grandmother when her grandfather's mementos had been disturbed. Just been distributed. It had been believed since ancient times that the strange powers dwell within mirrors. Most likely, the way they reflect light created a belief that they also deflect misfortune and malice in the same way. Natsuhi returned the mirror to its pouch. It would probably be a fitting object to hand over to Jessica. Suddenly, just as she was placing it in her pocket, the sound of someone knocking on the door suddenly echoed through the room. Yes.
Good morning, madam. It is Genji. My apologies for waking you so early.
I am coming now. What is it? No servant had ever come to her this early in the morning, and especially not directly. Maybe something bad had happened. For example, maybe some fatal oversight may have been made during the preparations for breakfast, and the household would be put to shame in front of the guests or something. Natsuhi breathed out slowly, as if getting a head start on the trouble she was surely about to be told of. When she opened the door, Genji once again said a morning greeting to her and while bowing deeply. Natsuhi tentatively responded. Good morning. Did something happen?
My apologies. It seems that the telephones are out of order due to last night's light. The internal lines have gone dead, so please forgive my coming to see you directly.
The internal lines have gone dead? That will be troublesome. Will it be possible to repair it?
I'm afraid that we do not know the location of the damage.
Also, do I look like some kind of telephone pole repairman?
Right? I would like to call an expert and have him repair it.
Which means that we will be unable to repair it until the typhoon has passed. In other words, the line will be out of order for the remainder of our guests' stay. Will there be any issues with providing them proper service?
We will do all we can to make sure there are none.
Very well. I will be counting on you to ensure that everything goes smoothly. Natsuhi let out a small sigh of relief. She had been prepared for the worst, but a telephone breakdown wasn't the kind of trouble she was worried about. But then, even this would probably be enough to spark sarcasm from Ava. Natsuhi gave her head a slight shake. Are the preparations for breakfast proceeding well?
Oh.
Nice mind reading.
About that, we haven't been able to find Goda. The arrangements for breakfast have yet to be carried out.
What did you say? Natsuhi was indignant. To her, this was a much bigger problem than the phone's not working. And despite that, this piece of information was the part that had been postponed. Why did everything go well most of the time, and then come to something like this when the relatives were visiting? Natsuhi placed a hand on her forehead and shook her head sharply. Most likely he is oversleeping. Anyway, it doesn't matter who does it, just hurry with preparing breakfast. What? Natsuhi had exited into the hall and turned around for a second to close the door to her room. The unpleasant thing that she saw there silenced her completely. It was an unsettling sight, as if someone had dipped their fingers in a dark red liquid and clawed at the area around the doorknob. As though someone had soaked both of their hands in blood and groped at the door and the knob. Like someone was wanting to stage something like that and left this mark as an awful prank. What wicked mischief is this? How awful!
I also just noticed it as I came to call you. I will clean it later.
Most likely, a vulgar joke by one of the guests. Disgusting, truly disgusting. Who in the world would pull such a childish and disgusting prank? Natsuhi had a pretty good idea, but of course there was no proof. So even if she was pushed the issue, it would just seem as though she was making a fuss about nothing. On the contrary, it would definitely be better for her to stay. She hadn't even noticed that such a prank had been played in the first place. Natsuhi gave the order to have it cleaned and headed off to the parlor with clacking heels. When Natsuhi and Genji arrived in the parlor, Eva and Hideyoshi were already there. Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Natsuhi-san.
Gotta get my laughs out now, god damn it.
I heard Goda-san will be making us breakfast too, isn't that right?
Jesus Christ.
My stomach's been getting all excited since I woke up. Wait.
Wait. Yes, food is about the only thing worth looking forward to here, isn't it?
The fuck you trying to say?
I'm just saying. You too, Eva-san. I'm pleased to hear that you are well this morning. Natsuhi returned Eva's gaze, which was fiercely competitive even though it was early in the morning, with a weary expression. Then Kanon jogged in. After bowing an apology to the relatives for running inside the mansion, he approached Genji and told him something in a small voice. Kanon, have you still not found Goda? My apologies, madam. I went all around inside of the mansion and the guest house, but still, where in the world has he gone? For now, breakfast is the highest priority than finding Goda. Quickly take care of it. Yes. Kanon glanced at Genji. It looked like he had something else to report, but needed to ask Genji whether he was in the right person to say it. Genji nodded and decided to give the report himself.
Madam, it is not only Goda. Your husband is also nowhere to be found.
Oh.
My husband?
Yes. I thought I would report to him before you about the lack of preparation for breakfast, and visited his room. But I did not find him there. Furthermore, it is not only he who is missing. Rudolph-sama and his wife, as well as Rosa-sama, are nowhere to be found.
Not even in the guest house? And not in the mansion?
Yes. Nor are they in their rooms in the guest house.
When she had heard that Goda alone was missing, she had thought that he might have slept in or was loafing around somewhere. But once she heard that several of the relatives were also missing, she began to start thinking a little more optimistically. Last night's family conference might have continued all night, and in fact, might still be going on. It would then be imaginable that they had wanted to cool off their heads after being in that stuffy room, and all had gone off on a group walk through the rain. The part of cooling off their heads really sounded like something Kraus would like to say. Probably, Goda had been called to go with them to aid them with something. Goda was not a man who lost track of time. He had to have understood that if he did not return, the preparations for breakfast would be hindered. So perhaps, as much as he'd like to leave, the atmosphere would not permit him to, and the conference was continuing in that manner even at this very moment. Yes, Natsuhi thought this was an extremely persuasive. Natsuhi remembered the illusion that she had felt that morning of being sucked into a continuation of the previous night. And upon learning the feeling wasn't just an illusion, she once again let out a deep, weary breath. Because the banquet of the filthy vultures circling around Kinzo's property was still continuing. Most likely they are still repeating the same discussion about the inheritance somewhere in the garden or maybe the beach. In any case, we must call Goda back, or we will never be able to complete the preparations for breakfast.
So what are you saying? Are Nissan and the rest still continuing their discussion?
She had thought she'd spoken in a small voice, but Hideyoshi had overheard her and managed to grasp the situation. Nissan and Rudolph sure are tough. And maybe it's just youth in Rosa's case. The two of us were so tired we had to go back to bed just after midnight. I do remember that Nissan and the rest were still having a heated discussion at that point. Men sure are nasty when they get excited. Natsuhi snorted, her face still blank.
Kanon, search outside. If you find Goda, tell him to return immediately and begin preparations for breakfast.
Certainly. Natsuhine-san! They aren't necessarily outside, right? Couldn't they also be inside Father's study?
Sure. I could see that. I don't know what they've been discussing, but there's also a decent chance they moved to Father's study and included him in the discussion.
I cannot imagine that Father would willingly invite that detestable topic into his study. You really think so? Well, then there's nothing we can do. I'm sorry, Genji-san, Kanon-kun, but could you search outside? I'm sure it wouldn't be odd for a Nissan to propose that they go outside for a walk to cool their heads, even in this weather. I will go to Father's study. After all, there's still some chance they'll be there, isn't there?
Eva-san, a guest such as you mustn't trouble herself. I will go. I can also tell him good morning.
Really? Then I'm counting on you, all right. But I somehow doubt whether he will return your greeting. Natsuhine-san, were you on good terms with Father?
I don't know whether it could be called good terms, but I am certain that I have gained his trust as the wife of the successor to the Ushiromiya family.
Then I'm sure that he will at least answer you, won't he? I want to at least eat breakfast with Father. I wonder if you could convince him to come down and join us. It seems that he thoroughly despises the rest of us, but I'm sure if his trusted Natsuhi asks, he will surely listen. If you can't convince Father after speaking to me so sharply, and have come to down by yourself, I doubt you will ever be able to say that you have gained his trust, will you?
I am not confident, but I will try. Natsuhi responded, discouraged. However, knowing Kinzo's temperament, she had absolutely no confidence in her ability to bring him out. Eva herself was treating it like a joke, expecting that it couldn't be done. Yet even so, Natsuhi would lose face if she gave up, said it was impossible for her, and let Eva go instead. Eva's mean-spirited and unreasonable demand caused Natsuhi's tightly clenched fist to shake. When Genji realized this, he softly spoke to her over her shoulder.
Immediately imagining wherever you said her fist clenching.
The Arthur
meme.
Arthur meme?
Madam, if you would, please take this.
Is that? Genji handed Natsuhi a sparkling gold key of ornate design.
Oh.
It was the key to Kinzo's study.
I'm assuming at this point he just has a bed in there as well, so he can stay further locked in there.
A study would always lock itself, and couldn't be unlocked as long as Kinzo forbade entrance. However, since Genji was especially trusted by Kinzo, he was allowed to carry a key to that door. But if this key is used, won't you also receive the blame?
When the master is sleeping deeply, simple knocking on the door may not reach his ears. And when persuading the master to leave his room, it would be more difficult if you must talk through the door. Please use it.
Genji. Until now, Natsuhi had thought of Genji as a cold servant who worked directly under Kinzo, and would never work for her. But it looked like she would have to alter her understanding of him. She wanted to communicate her feelings of thanks, but by then, Genji had already turned his back on her, and was walking down the corridor with Kenon. But as Natsuhi watched them go, the words that reached her from behind were sneering. Be sure you bring father with you then, okay? After all, it's his son's darling wife who's asking. I'm sure he'll listen to you. We are guests, so let us leisurely relax here.
Wait, Ava, you're talking too much. Sorry, but Natsuhi saying we'll leave father to you.
Natsuhi left without replying, at a swift pace, her heels clacking loudly with every step. After all the excitement of the previous night, there was no way anyone was going to wake up soon. George, Aniki, Jessica, and I were snoring loudly on the bed in the cousin's room. But Maria, who didn't join in, and who had gone straight to bed the previous night, suddenly and completely opened her eyes. She
even went to bed holding the bag too.
As she rubbed her sleepy eyes and looked around, the loud snoring coming from the three cousins continued. For a while, Maria had to think about what had happened. After that, she realized that her mother was not with her, and quickly got lonely. Maria left the cousins' room, trying to head to the room that had been arranged for her and her mother. Paying no heed to the three who were sleeping soundly, she made a loud slamming on the way out. In response, Battler mumbled and rolled over in his sleep, but it wasn't enough to wake him up. After a while, Maria returned, once again opening the door with a lively bang. When she had left the room, her face had been sleepy, but after returning, she now looked discontent. After that, she climbed up on Battler's bed, which happened to be the closest, and started yelling and jumping on it like a trampoline. Wake up!
What? Is it a raid? Surround them!
After making sure that I was awake, Maria jumped over to George Aniki's bed and started bouncing on that too. In that manner, the three of us were all greeted with an extremely pleasant awakening.
Thanks, Maria-chan, for waking us up. You stopped us from sleeping in after that late night. But it would have been perfect if you could just been a little more gentle.
George Nissan, you really are an adult. I respect that.
Almost 7. Well, not really a bad time to wake up. Yeah, it is. Too fucking early.
Breakfast, man!
Nah. You guys all have breakfast like around 10.
Mama's not here!
Auntie Rosa? She wasn't in her room? I wonder if she has already woken up and gone to the mansion.
She's not here!
Madia kept groaning ooh and looking unhappy. It seemed like she wasn't simply lonely because she couldn't find her mother, but actually unhappy because her mother wasn't in the place she thought she was, and this made her feel like she'd been tricked. If we could have just told her where her mother was, that might have been enough to satisfy her. But unfortunately, as long as we were here, we had no way of finding that out.
It's time to go for breakfast anyway, so let's head over to the mansion.
Good idea. Maria, let's go to the mansion together, okay? I'm sure Auntie Rose will be over there too.
Mama's in the mansion? Then I'll go.
That's right. Go to the mansion. Your parents have probably already gone there.
Madia regained her usual composure, as though her earlier temper had never happened. We got dressed, left the room, and headed for the mansion.
Transition.
It's lovely transitions! The door to the study was once again knocked upon, but there was no answer. He was still sleeping, and she couldn't wake him. If she returned downstairs saying something like that, Eva would be very amused and triumphant. And even aside from the whole Eva issue, there was the problem that yesterday, during this once-a-year family conference, he had stayed locked up all day, and still had not come out to greet the guests. Even though he was the head, no, especially because he was the head, he couldn't fail to make an appearance. Had she convinced him? Natsuhi readied herself and, using the key she had borrowed from Genji, opened the door.
And then a jump scare.
Boo! Ah! A sweet stench that seemed to eat into her brain poured from the narrow opening she had created, and though she was prepared for it, she couldn't help but grimace. Thinking that he still might be sleeping, Natsuhi entered the room quietly.
And it just seemed like slumped over on the table.
When she did, Kinzo, already awake, was looking out of the window. So you're awake. Good morning.
How did you get in?
Kinzo spoke with his back still facing her. His voice was not harsh, but calm, and Natsuhi was slightly reassured. However, he was at least in a bad enough mood that he ignored the sound of all that knocking even though he had been awake. Natsuki wasn't able to break the tension. My sincere apologies. I asked Genji-san, and he allowed me to borrow the key to the study.
Oh. Genji. If my friend thought it was... Oh wait, I remember you were telling me before that his design was based on Sean Connery, right?
Yep, Kinzo's design is based off of Sean Connery!
I'm just trying to remember how I found it. If my friend thought that it wasn't important, then I have no choice but to listen. Tell me, what business do you have?
Yes. Breakfast will soon be prepared, and I would greatly appreciate it if you would join us.
I will eat here. I have brought it here like all.
But, Father, this is the annual family conference.
I don't care. I am Sean Connery.
Please, at least let them see your face.
You ask me to go downstairs and join in on the discussion of how my inheritance is to be chewed apart after I die? I will. They can keep talking about that kind of thing as much as they like without me. And if that's what you call a family conference, it's nothing so important that I should leave my room for it. I am busy. I'll run. Do not bother me.
With his last words came the threat of any further questions would be useless. Natsuhi realized that adding any further pleas would finally bring his wrath down upon her.
Damn right.
It would be annoying to hear Eva sarcastically say she hadn't been able to convince him after all, but there was nothing more Natsuhi could do.
You want me to feed the babies?
No, they still have food. Is that so? Understood. I'm sure that everyone will be sorry to hear it, but I will tell them. Natsuhi decided to give up. Bowing silently, she made to leave the room before Kinzo's spasmodic temper would flare up. could fire up. As she did, Kinzo called out to her. Compared to the usual Kinzo, this voice was calm and gentle, like it came from another person.
Natsuhi. It has been quite some time since you married into the Ushiromiya family.
Yes. It has been a while since I was first permitted to bear the name Ushiromiya.
Do you sometimes long for your previous family?
No. Marriage means throwing away your parents' family.
Not really?
Rich people.
Fair.
I'm Ushiromiya Natsui. If I have a family to return to, or to reminisce over, it is only the Ushiromiya family. It was definitely not an exaggeration. Such was the level of Natsuhi's resolve in calling herself an Ushiromiya. That was why she was so sorrowful that, despite all of her effort, it had been fruitless, and she was not even accepted by her husband.
Why the fuck did you marry him? If Kraus had been a woman, and you had been the husband. No, I won't say that.
What do you mean by that? Father? Natsuhi was shocked. If Kinzo's words just now had been meant literally, they would have been more than enough to make up for all that she had suffered up until that point.
Forget it. It's just the nonsense of an old man.
Kinzo once again faced away from her. He had told her to forget it, but Natsuhi couldn't help feeling a warmth in her heart. Father, even though I'm not connected to you by blood, I am still your daughter. The honor and glory of the Ushiromiya family, and everything that you have left. I guarantee you, I will see it protected myself.
You do not have the qualifications to wear the one-winged eagle. However, the one-winged eagle is surely engraved in your heart. In that case, you are unmistakably my blood relative, and one who will inherit the glory of the Ushiromiya family. Will sneer that there is no eagle on your cloak. However, that is nothing to lend ear to. Only those who hold the eagle in their heart are my true blood relatives. I now believe it an honor that I was able to welcome you into the Ushiromiya family.
Without saying anything more, Kinzo remained with his back to Natsuhi. However, Natsuhi couldn't help but feel something warm well up inside her that she hadn't felt since so long ago, when she had just been a child. Natsuhi bowed silently to his back and left the room. Ah, what perfect timing! How is father? You were taking so long I came to check, Susie. When Natsuhi left the study, she saw Eva climbing the stairs, and their eyes met. Eva was smirking unpleasantly, thinking that Natsuhi had just left the room trudgingly after failing to convince Kinzo. However, the way Natsuhi was now, such a frivolous laugh would not disturb her. She was not permitted to wear the family crest on her clothing, but she was permitted to wear it on her heart. So she spoke calmly, clearly, and confidently, with the dignity of the one who would protect the glory of the Ushiromiya family. Father said that he would not join in on the family conference. He says that he has no interest in such an obscene topic. Yes, excuses. If you weren't able to persuade Father, say so frankly. How pitiful. I'm beginning to understand Father's feelings of regret. What do you mean by that? Natsuhi did not answer. Just as Kinzo had done earlier, she showed Eva her back as she headed down the stairs.
Get fucked.
Pretty much. Struggling to gather what had happened, Eva could only determine that she had been made fun of. and that something had happened to quickly bolster Natsuhi's confidence. Even so, she didn't have the courage to risk Kinzo's wrath. Unable to even knock on the door, she could only scratch at the air in front of it, cluck her tongue, and follow after Natsuhi.
So, were Nissan and the rest there? Did Father tell you about them?
I didn't get the chance to ask, but they were not inside the study. Father would never let them into his room to discuss such a lowly topic, so it is unlikely that he knows where they went. Let us go downstairs and wait for the servants to return from their search. Breakfast may be late, but how about some tea, Eva-san? I will be fine. Eva couldn't hide her confusion over the complete difference in Natsuhi's demeanor. She was acting so boldly, and while Eva hated to admit it, she even had a sense of dignity about her. Unable to find fault with anything, she could only follow Natsuhi back to the parlor. When the two of them returned to the parlor, not only Hideyoshi, but the 4 children and Nanjo as well were gathered there. Genji, who had been talking with Hideyoshi, reported the current situation when he noticed that Natsuhi had returned. You still have not found my husband or the rest?
Yes, my apologies. Also, Kumasawa had begun preparations for breakfast.
She said that she would just need a little longer. The clock read a little past 8 a.m. 8 o'clock was the time that breakfast was supposed to have started. The mere fact that the host had gone over that time limit was a disgrace under normal circumstances.
Kanon is now searching outside. Furthermore, no one has seen Shannon.
Even Shannon? Honestly, how many people has my husband taken on this walk of his? How many people couldn't be found? With the number of people having grown so large, it was starting to feel truly unpleasant, as though they were the only ones being left out on something interesting. At the very least, it looked like the children, Maria, especially felt the same way. She was indignant, her stomach grumbling, almost as though her mother and the others had left her alone to go off and eat something delicious without her. Trying to fix her bad mood, the other children were flipping through the channels on the television, trying to find a program that might interest Maria. Nanjo was sitting on the sofa, gazing blissfully at the children while reading a book. No doubt it was a book about chess. The sound of footsteps came rushing towards them with a pitter-patter. There was only one set, so they realized before they saw the source that it was not Kraus, but in the rest, probably Kanon.
Madam, excuse me.
Judging by your appearance, you still haven't been able to find them.
My apologies.
That will be enough. You've worked hard. She didn't know where they were, but they had to be somewhere on this island. They hadn't put anything in their mouths since last night, so their stomachs must be growling by now. They would surely saunter in any time now. Natsuhi was already dumbfounded, and she had begun to think that there was no urgent need to find them right then. I will go to the kitchen and prepare some tea for all the guests. Thanks to both of you for all of your hard work so early in the morning. Natsuhi, acting as though the release intention had caused a new surge in her headache, left the parlor. Kanon tried to call her as she left, but Natsuhi departed swiftly.
What is it? Was there something else?
Yes. I was unable to find her husband and anyone else, but... Kanon sounded evasive. He still didn't know where they were, but maybe he had found something in some relation to that. When Eva and Hideyoshi noticed this exchange of words, they came over. They had probably noticed the slightly strange way Kanon was acting. No, you're good.
What's going on, Cannon-kun? Did you find Kraus, Nissan, and the others?
Actually, something looked odd about the Rose Garden storehouse.
Something looked odd? What do you mean by that?
It was, how should I explain it? Kanon once again hesitated.
Let it out.
He wasn't speaking anything like you'd expect from the usually fearless Kanon. Eva and Hideyoshi exchanged quizzical looks at this display. What do you mean? You don't mean to say that they're inside the storehouse? No. I'm going to inspect the inside now. I was just returning to get the key, but...
I don't really get it, but it sounds like we just gotta investigate inside, right? Where's the key to that storehouse? Don't tell me it's in this. Okay.
It is in the servant room. Let's check inside the storehouse immediately. Cannon dashed off to the servant room and returned with the key. Genji left the parlor, saying he would go check, but Eva and Hideyoshi also followed. What was this something odd about the storehouse that had caused the usually fearless Cannon to hesitate? It was still pouring outside, but the curiosity over this something that Cannon couldn't talk about won out. While the children made a big fuss watching television, Cannon and the rest dashed off to the entrance. The Rose Garden was a place that housed various tools used to manage the garden. It was definitely not a pretty building. Because of its appearance, it had been built hidden in a corner of the Rose Garden. Cannon, Genji, Eva, and Hideyoshi came cutting across the Rose Garden holding umbrellas. They entered the small path just off the Rose Garden, which was not used by those simply appreciating the garden, but only by those maintaining it. As they dashed further along it, the front of the storehouse came into view. It was a very old shed of the storehouse, and compared to the flawlessly perfect beauty of the Rose Garden, it was pretty seedy looking. It was easy to understand why it had been built in a hard-to-see place. Eva and Hideyoshi arrived at the storehouse long after Cannon and Genji.
You two sure are fast. I thought my heart was gonna explode.
I guess they did build a storehouse over here. But what is that? When Eva looked over at what Cannon was pointing, she was at a loss for words. Noticing this, Hideyoshi also followed Cannon's finger, and likewise, too, shocked to speak. The entrance to the storehouse was a kind of shutter. And there, everyone there now understood why Cannon had been unable to find words that could describe what he saw.
What?
On the shutter, which was completely filthy from being exposed to wind and rain for so long, plastered on it.
Yep.
Something that looked like strange, dark red liquid? Mucus? Or maybe it was some sticky paint.
Oh no.
Some kind of ghastly substance had been used to draw an indescribably eerie shape. The rain had caused it to drip down in several places, like fresh blood leaking from an open wound. There was no longer any point in being choosy with words. A ghastly dark red substance, meant to look like blood, had been used to draw some kind of figure or mark, intended to suggest something ominous. 2 concentric circles were drawn there, and inside them was a design that looked like a cross. The 4 ends of the cross were widely exaggerated, and it looked like some kind of crest from somewhere around Europe. And in the cracks between the shapes, written closely packed together, were some unfamiliar characters, or possibly symbols.
Yeah, the location of Europe, I think it was some place called Schmermany.
Schmermany! Lamau! Who's summoning the land?
What a vulgar bit of graffiti. Could this be one of those? One of those magic circles used in demonic rituals?
With reference to this ghastly shape, drawn with a deep red dripping substance, Hideyoshi's comparison was not unreasonable. Where was this drawn? Last night. I came here before it started raining, but there was nothing drawn here at the time.
We must do something before anyone else sees this. If they laid eyes upon it, it would cause them great discomfort.
Does nobody here have a hose?
That's right. Even though it's just a shed, I don't want to leave such an unpleasant scribble untouched for even 1 second.
There is some paint inside the storehouse. Let us paint over it temporarily as an emergency measure. Then repaint it again someday when the weather is good.
Genji remembered that he had just recently seen another piece of graffiti, and that it had been made with a strange dark red substance of the same color as this. That must have been... That's right. He had seen it on the door to Natsuhi's room. Kanan-kun, let's remove this graffiti quickly and return, alright? Even though it's just a storehouse, it's really irritating to have graffiti around the home I was brought up in. Yes, I will take care of it immediately. Kanan squatted in front of the shutter and unlocked it. He then lifted it up with all of his strength. A boisterous noise resounded, and the eerie shape was drawn on the shutter began to get sucked in through the top as the shutter was raised. At least for the time being, that ominous thing disappeared from the direct gaze, and they all breathed a sigh of relief. Thanks to the kids' program they had come across, Maria was feeling much better. Badler and Jessica were making fun of the kids' program at every turn, cackling. George was enjoying the program along with Maria. Nanjo sat on the sofa by himself, passing the time by reading quietly. They heard hurried footsteps coming from the hallway. They were footsteps from a single person. Did that mean that it wasn't the group of the four that had just left? Genji was the one who had returned. It was very rare for Genji, who considered being out of breath a violation of servants' virtues, to be gasping for air. He had probably come dashing back from outside the mansion. His shoulders were soaking wet, and he didn't have his usual smart appearance. When Genji noticed Nanjo looking at him, he gave a small silent bow and quickly approached him.
Dr. Nanjo, my apologies. Please, come with me, quickly. What has happened?
As Genji whispered something to Nanjo's ear, Nanjo's face changed color. He stood from the sofa, trying not to be noticed by the children who were still engrossed by the TV, and the two of them rapidly left the parlor, muffling their footsteps. As they were leaving the parlor, they came across Natsuhi, who was pushing a serving cart loaded with a tea set. Genji whispered something into Natsuhi's ear, and Natsuhi's face, too, changed color. Shock. Then, leaving the serving cart where it was, the three of them started dashing towards the entrance. George noticed them running down the rose garden through the window.
What's this? Genji-san and Dr. Nanjo and that's Aunt Natsuhi, isn't it? What's up, Aniki? Maybe something has happened. They look horribly flustered.
Jessica and Maria also realized something had happened from the fact that Eva, Hideyoshi, and Nanjo were no longer in their seats, and because the serving cart had been abandoned at the entrance to the parlor.
Could there have been some kind of accident?
Let's go check it out. It's no fun if we're the only ones left out, right? Hee.
For some reason, what Badler said sounded extremely indiscreet. But they couldn't deny that they were a little insecure and concerned after seeing the adults run off into the rain, disregarding their appearance.
Let's check it out, alright? I need to know what's happened.
Jessica's insecure words spoke for all of them.
Hey, Maria, are you coming too? Or will you watch TV?
I want TV!
Then the rest of us will go by ourselves. Maria-chan, we'll be back soon, and this totally isn't going to be a good... this totally won't backfire, leaving the 9-year-old alone by herself in the big mansion that may or may not have Beatrice walking around the halls. They're here watching TV.
By the time the kids went outside, they had lost sight of the adults, who had left early. But it looked like Jessica had a pretty good idea of where they had gone from the direction they had been running. Following Jessica, they ran through the rain-soaked rose garden. It felt like the wind suddenly got stronger. The malicious sound of thunder began to ring out like it had the previous night. It felt like something eerie had surrounded the island and was trying to stop them from moving forward.
Jessica, what's over this way?
I'm pretty sure that there's a storehouse for gardening tools or something.
What in the world could be there in a place like that?
Just as Jessica had said that, a storehouse came into view in front of them. They could also see the adults there. The shutter to the storehouse was open, and several of the adults looked as though they were searching for something. For some reason, only Natsuhi was inside the storehouse, not even holding an umbrella. She was facing away from them, and it looked like she was hanging her head. The only one, the ones who had just left, Genji, Nanjo, Natsuhi, and the ones who had left before them, Kanon, Eva, and Hideyoshi, made this large gathering of people, but there was absolutely no bustle of activity. When Natsuhi realized that the children had come, a terrible expression rose to her face, and she ran at them with her arms spread wide. "Don't come over here! Go back to the mansion!" However, no, because of that, the kids saw that scene which Natsuhi was trying to keep them away from. Inside the storehouse, with the shutter wide open, a flickering fluorescent light shone down. And over there...
Probably could have given me a warning on that.
Sorry, I tried to turn away from that, sorry. Jessica's piercing shriek ran out. But that was just because Jessica's scream was the loudest. The same thing spilled out of Battler and George's mouth as well. Eva, just like Natsuhi, spread her arms and with a terrible expression roared at the kids. "George, take everyone and return to the mansion! Quickly! Right now!" When Natsuhi had spread her arms, one might have thought that she was trying to prevent them from advancing any further. However, right now, that wasn't why Eva was spreading her arms. She was trying to hide that terrible scene from the kids. It was her mother's heart, trying to protect the eyes and hearts of us children by attempting to block our view of that terrible scene by at least the width of one of her arms.
Is this some kind of joke? Is it? Ooh.
I had seen this kind of cheap scene all too often. In manga, TV, anime, and in movies, I'd seen it over and over again. It was just seeing something appear in real life that I had seen plenty of times before in some of those more sensational movies, wasn't it?
Alright, who spilled the Kool-Aid?
That alone shouldn't... But that suit, it's that old bastard's, isn't it? I get it. And that's Uncle Kraus. And Kirie-san. And Auntie Rosa! Ah! Dad! Dad! You mustn't, Jessica! You mustn't go in! You mustn't look! Dad! Dad! Ah!
Let's sure hope that we don't get any noise complaints.
Rigor mortis has set in across the entire body. Probably at least 6 hours have passed since death. As far as I can tell by looking at the damaged area, there's a high probability that they were damaged after their deaths. No, I must watch what I say. The general practitioner examining corpses is outside my area of expertise.
What does that mean? Just killing them wasn't enough? They went on to do something like this? The devil. This here is the work of a devil.
Auntie Natsuhi caught Jessica in her arms, and Auntie Eva caught George Aniki. So I was the only one who could approach the entrance to the storehouse. If only there had been someone here to catch me too. I wouldn't have seen this horrible, evil scene burned into my eyes. No, that's not it. I'm standing here not because the people who would catch me weren't here, but because the people who would catch me are right there. Just as Jessica had said, it did look like a storehouse used to keep gardening tools. A lawnmower and a replacement blades, a grass sickle and a hammer, a saw and some construction tools, piles of pot plants and bags of fertilizer. And treated just the same. The corpses of several people had been laid to rest there.
So it wasn't just one.
No, it had been thrown in there. I could tell them by their clothes. That old bastard and Kirie-san, Uncle Kraus and Auntie Rosa. Further back, Dora-san and... There's still more of them? How many people died? Fucking hell! I can't even count them on one hand! God fucking damn it! I didn't know whether it had been one of these gardening tools, which was, if used for something other than their intended purpose, could definitely be wielded with a naked brutality, but whether some horrible tool had been brought in here specifically for this. Whatever the case, the bodies lying about here, each of them had been given an atrocious makeover. This isn't a damn makeover. It's more like their faces have been plowed. Their faces were smashed, forced into an expression that a normal person couldn't even make after death. I couldn't tell where the eyes and noses were, but I could find the mouth, because it was gaping wide, the ridges of the teeth exposed. But the front teeth were missing, and even the cheek that would have covered it all had torn up and exposed. The stylish makeup he had spent way too much time fussing over for a guy is no help at all.
I've already done this thing.
Dad!
Dad. Sure, I always thought you were going to hell. You weren't this bad, right? You weren't such a son of a bitch to have this done to you. Kitty-san. Didn't I tell you to stop going out with this guy? There was no reason for you to go through this as well. There's no face. There's no fucking face. Shit.
Anna-san, you mustn't look anymore. There's no way that your mother and father would want you to see them like this.
Are we actually going to see the bodies, or is it
No.
just...
We will not see these bodies.
Okay.
For your mother and your father's sakes, you mustn't look anymore. But basically, if you really want a detailed expression, it's basically bodies lined up in accordance of being thrown in there. So imagine a big motherfucker grabbed these bodies and just chucked them in. And while there is like bodily damage from being thrown in there, their faces looks like they've been pawed off with a shotgun. Or even so, like smashed in with a fucking hammer. Like, it is that gruesome. It's purely the faces. So, yeah.
Dead people are supposed to have faces that look like they're sleeping peacefully, aren't they? There's no face. My dad and Kitty-san have no faces. I don't even know what kind of faces they were wearing when they died. What the hell am I meant to do? They're telling me I have to see these mangled monstrous faces every time I remember Dad and the rest? Well, that's perfect.
Gotta wait.
But they didn't even want to remember that old bastard smug face anyway. This is perfect. Perfect! But you know, why Kitty-san's face as well? Kitty-san wasn't a bastard. I sometimes get a little sick of her, but she was a little cool. She was like a big sister to me. She didn't deserve this. She didn't deserve this. At least Uncle Kraus is better, isn't he?
Loading, not yet. I'll check it later, not yet.
It's not his whole face, just the side. He at least has half of his fucking face left. Better that than this. Better that than this.
I already did my scream, I'm sorry. I'm not doing it again. Trying to shut out my reckless words, Jessica tried to fill her ears with the sound of her own screaming.
Stop it, Batman-kun. Stop it. Just stop it. Aniki! Aniki!
Ah! Sorry, we can't do much screaming. We still live with neighbors. So, disregarding age and appearance, I fell to my knees, clinging to Aniki's waist and sobbing. It was as if I was crying on behalf of everyone there. Representing the feelings of everyone there, I screamed over and over.
Insert screaming here.